When you go to Yellowstone or Yosemite, you are not just racing to visit them with Americans, you are competing with travelers from Europe, Asia, and all over the world. These have been some of the most well-known places on the planet for decades. And then around 2013, when Instagram started taking off, social media poured fuel on the fire. According to a recent Georgia Tech study, visits to the most talked about parks jumped around 20%, and the crowds that came with them have yet to leave. The whole point of visiting nature is to escape to somewhere peaceful. Yellowstone, Yosemite, and some other extremely well-known parks have not offered that in a while. Today we're looking at 6 that still can. About 2.5 hours east of Seattle is one of the most visually striking pieces of land in the entire country, and most Americans have never heard of it. I'm talking about North Cascades National Park. It covers over 500,000 acres of jagged peaks, ancient glaciers, and turquoise water that is hard to find in the US. The park contains over 300 glaciers, more glaciers than any other spot in the United States outside of Alaska. The result of that is lakes like Diablo Lake, its most famous attraction. The reason most people skip it comes down to one thing: Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is the famous Washington volcano, the postcard shot, the one everyone knows, as it is one of the most recognizable mountains in the world. North Cascades sits in the shadow despite being maybe the more dramatic landscape. There are no major resort towns nearby, limited cell service once you're in, and the park's main corridor only opens fully in late spring. For the right kind of traveler, those are not drawbacks. That is the whole point of seeking out nature in the first place, in my opinion. Next up, we have Big Bend National Park. This park sits in the far southwest corner of Texas, pressed right up against the Rio Grande and the Mexican border. It is one of the largest national parks in the lower 48, covering over 800,000 acres, and it consistently ranks among the least visited despite being, by any objective measure, one of the most extraordinary landscapes in the country. Part of that comes down to location. The nearest major airport is in El Paso, about 4 hours away, and the surrounding area offers very little in the way of infrastructure. But once you are there, the scale of the place is difficult to process. Chisos Mountains rise from the desert floor, the Rio Grande carves dramatic canyons along the border, and at night, Big Bend has some of the darkest skies you will see in the country, which makes it one of the premier stargazing destinations in North America. US News and Afar have both named on their lists of best US national parks for stargazing. It has been designated Dark Sky Park, a status shared by only a handful of places in the country. The remoteness that keeps most people away is exactly what makes the experience worth having. Next up, we have Black Canyon of the Gunnison in Colorado. Most people who have driven through Colorado will tell you about Rocky Mountain National Park, about Maroon Bells, about the scenery along I-70. Very few will mention Black Canyon of the Gunnison, which is a strange oversight given that it is one of the most dramatic geological sites in the United States. The canyon drops over 2,700 feet at its deepest point, with walls so sheer and so dark that parts of the gorge receive less than 30 minutes of direct sunlight per day, which is how it got its name in the first place. The Gunnison River carved it over 2 million years, cutting through some of the oldest exposed rock on the planet. The nearest city of any real size is Montrose, Colorado, which sits about 15 miles away. It is not on the way to anywhere in particular, which means it stays quiet. The fourth entry we have on the list is Crater Lake in Oregon. This is a lake about 4 hours south of Portland, Oregon in the Oregon Cascades, and it holds a legitimate claim being the most visually striking body of water in North America. Crater Lake was formed roughly 7,700 years ago when a volcanic eruption caused Mount Mazama to collapse into itself, leaving behind a caldera that eventually filled with snow melt and rain over thousands of years. The result is a lake nearly 2,000 feet deep, the deepest in the United States, with water so pure and so still that it reflects the sky in a shade of blue that almost seems artificial. There are no rivers flowing in and out, no sediment, no runoff, just exceptionally clear water that's been collecting for millennia. The park sits at high elevation, which makes it another one of the best parks in the country for stargazing, considering it is in Oregon's dark sky sanctuary, the largest in the world. It also stays snowed in for much of the year, which limits the season and keeps the crowds manageable even in the summer. It is not unknown, as Oregonians are well aware of it, but on a national scale it remains one of those places that mainly people have never heard of. Next up, we have Saguaro National Park. Saguaro National Park is unusual on this list because it is not remote. It sits on the outskirts of Tucson, split into 2 districts on either side of the city, which means it is one of the most accessible national parks in the country. It is also one of the most overlooked, largely because it does not match what most people picture when they think of a national park. There are no dramatic canyons, no glaciers, no crater lakes. What Saguaro National Park has is the largest concentration of saguaro cacti in the world. Those tall, iconic 2-armed cacti that define the visual identity of the American Southwest. Walking through a forest of them at sunrise or sunset, when the desert light turns everything gold, is a completely different experience from any other park on this list. The Tucson location means you can be standing in it within minutes of landing at the airport, and yet most visitors to Arizona head straight to Sedona or the Grand Canyon without ever stopping here. Finally, you have Capitol Reef in Utah. Capitol Reef, sandwiched between Arches and Bryce Canyon geographically, gets a fraction of the visitors despite being by many accounts the most interesting of the 5 from a geological standpoint. When you look at the park, you almost feel like you are more in Arizona than in Utah. The park is centered on a nearly 100-mile-long geological fold called the Water Pocket Fold, where layers of rocks have been pushed upward over millions of years, creating a rippled landscape of domes, canyons, and cliffs in shades of red, orange, and white that shift as the light changes throughout the day. It is a strange and beautiful place that most people drive past on their way between more famous destinations. Those 6 national parks are all great and worth visiting. I'll put them in the description below in case you missed any of them. None are in the top 10 most visited national parks in the country, which means none of them require you to set an alarm to beat the crowds to a parking lot. The US has 63 national parks. The same handful dominate the conversation every year, while the rest of them largely sit in peace. And this summer is expected to potentially be the busiest year on record for national park travel in the US. I would consider any of these 6 before getting stuck with the crowds at the globally known ones. Thanks for watching the video, and make sure to subscribe for more content like this. I will talk to you next week.